I never expected my 35th birthday dinner would become a family ambush. There I was, hosting everyone in the home I'd worked so hard to buy, when Mom stood up, champagne glass in hand. "We all agree," she announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Marcus should sell his house and give the money to Heather's baby fund. She needs it more." My cousins actually cheered. Dad smiled approvingly. My pregnant sister wiped away fake tears. The betrayal stung. But I was prepared. I just raised my glass, opened my phone, and read aloud a bank message that made every fork drop. That moment had been building for years, though I never imagined it would explode so publicly at my own birthday dinner. My relationship with my family, especially with my mother, had always been complicated. I'm Marcus Reynolds, 35 years old, and until 2 months ago, I was a senior IT specialist at a healthcare company. I'd spent years saving for my modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood in Portland. Nothing fancy, but it was mine, and I'd worked hard for every square foot. Growing up, it became clear early on that my sister Heather was the golden child. 3 years younger than me, she had a knack for getting what she wanted through a mixture of charm, tears, and my mother's unwavering support. Mom always justified it by saying Heather needed more help, or wasn't as naturally capable as I was. What she really meant was that Heather was better at playing the family game. Dad was different. Quiet, hardworking, with kind eyes that sometimes showed a hint of apology when Mom and Heather teamed up. He never directly confronted their behavior, but he'd slip me $20 when I needed it for a school trip or help me with homework late at night. "You're gonna be just fine, Marcus," he'd say, stronger than all of us put together. I held on to those rare moments of connection like treasures. Despite the family dynamics, I put myself through college, juggling 2 jobs while earning my degree in computer science. Meanwhile, Heather dropped out of 3 different programs before settling on a marketing degree that our parents fully funded. After graduation, I lived in a tiny studio apartment, eating ramen and working overtime to build my career and savings. Heather moved into a downtown apartment paid for by our parents until she met Tyler. Tyler Brooks came from old money, though you'd never know it by how often he and Heather complained about finances. He worked at his father's investment firm, wore designer clothes, and drove a BMW, but somehow they were always struggling or tightening their belts. When they announced Heather's pregnancy 6 months ago, it became the sole focus of every family gathering. "Marcus, isn't it wonderful?" Mom had gushed over brunch 3 months back. "You're going to be an uncle. Now we just need to make sure they have everything they need for the baby." The "we" in that sentence had steadily evolved to mean you over subsequent weeks. First, it was hints about my extra space in my house, then comments about how my bachelor lifestyle meant I had more disposable income. Never mind that I'd lost my job 2 months ago when the company downsized. I hadn't told anyone in my family, too proud and determined to find something new before they could use it as another example of how I needed direction compared to Heather. My cousin Amy was the only family member who saw through it all. "They're using you, Marcus," she'd told me during a phone call last week. "You know that, right? Aunt Linda has always played favorites. But this is getting ridiculous." My best friend Jack had been saying the same thing for years. We'd been friends since college, and he'd witnessed firsthand how my family dynamics worked. "Boundaries, man," he'd advised over beers 2 nights before my birthday. "You need to set some serious boundaries, or they'll keep taking until there's nothing left." I'd nodded, knowing he was right, but unsure if I could actually stand up to years of family conditioning. "I'm trying to be a good brother, a good son," I explained. "Being good doesn't mean being a doormat," Jack replied. "Besides, aren't they doing pretty well? Tyler's family has money, right?" "Supposedly," I answered. "But they're always talking about saving for the baby fund. Heather texted last week asking if I could contribute $5,000. Jack nearly choked on his beer. "5,000? For what?" "Baby stuff," I shrugged. I said I'd think about it. What I didn't tell Jack was that I was down to my last 3 months of savings if I didn't find a job soon. I had promising interviews lined up, but nothing certain. I'd been skipping lunches and cutting every possible expense while maintaining the appearance that everything was fine. The thought of telling my family about my job loss filled me with dread, knowing my mother would somehow turn it into a lecture about how I should have followed a safer career path like Tyler. The morning of my birthday, I woke up to a text from Heather. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Mom says you have a big announcement for us?" My stomach dropped. I had no announcement planned. Something was definitely off, but I couldn't imagine what my mother had orchestrated. Little did I know, my birthday dinner would become the stage for a confrontation that would change my relationship with my family forever. And though I didn't plan it, I did indeed have something to announce after all. The day of my birthday, I spent hours cleaning my house and preparing food despite my growing financial anxiety. I decided to host dinner myself rather than go to a restaurant to save money, though I told everyone it was because I wanted a more intimate celebration. I made my grandmother's lasagna recipe from scratch, prepared a salad, and splurged on a decent bottle of wine that had been on sale. Around 4 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Jack arrived early as promised, holding a six-pack and wearing a concerned expression. "Happy birthday, man," he said, giving me a quick hug before stepping inside. "House looks great. Thanks for coming early," I replied, taking the beer and heading to the kitchen. I could use the moral support. Jack leaned against the counter as I checked the lasagna. "You know, you could still cancel. Say you got food poisoning or something." I laughed without humor. "And deal with my mother's guilt trips for the next year?" "No thanks. Just remember what we talked about," Jack said, suddenly serious. "Your family takes advantage because you let them. Tonight might be a good time to start changing that pattern." "It's my birthday," I reminded him. "Maybe they'll actually focus on that for once." Jack's skeptical expression said everything. An hour later, my parents arrived. Mom breezed in without waiting for me to open the door fully, carrying an elaborately wrapped gift box with a blue ribbon. "Marcus, happy birthday," she said, kissing my cheek distantly before thrusting the box into my hands. "This is actually for the baby, but we thought you could keep it here until Heather's shower next month." Behind her, Dad gave me an apologetic smile and a firm handshake. "Happy birthday, son. 35, huh? Big one." I set the baby gift on a side table and tried to mask my disappointment. "Thanks for coming. Can I get you both a drink?" While Dad accepted a beer, Mom wandered through my living room, eyeing everything with a critical gaze. "This house really is too big for just one person, Marcus. 3 bedrooms? What do you even use them for?" "One's my bedroom, one's my office, and the third is a guest room," I answered, though we'd had this conversation before. "An office," she repeated with a little laugh. "For what? Couldn't you just use the kitchen table? And a guest room that sits empty most of the time. Such a waste of space when Heather and Tyler are crammed into that apartment with a baby on the way." I bit my tongue. Their cramped apartment was a luxury 2-bedroom downtown with a doorman and rooftop pool. Over the next half hour, more family arrived. My Uncle Greg and Aunt Paula, 3 cousins with their partners, and my mother's sister Janet with her husband. Everyone brought gifts, but as I opened them, I noticed a theme: baby books, a framed uncle photo collage, a gift card to a baby store. It seemed my birthday had already been co-opted into a pre-baby celebration. Cousin Amy arrived last before Heather and Tyler, pulling me into a genuine hug. "Happy real birthday," she whispered, pressing a wrapped package into my hands. "An actual gift for you. Don't open it in front of everyone." I slipped it onto a bookshelf, grateful for at least one person who remembered the occasion was supposed to be about me. When Heather and Tyler finally arrived 30 minutes late, they made a production of it. Heather, 6 months pregnant and barely showing in an expensive maternity dress, leaned heavily on Tyler as though she could barely walk. "Sorry we're late," she announced to the room. I was feeling so awful, but I insisted we come. I couldn't miss my big brother's birthday. She patted her small baby bump for emphasis. "Of course you couldn't," Mom cooed, rushing to help her to the most comfortable seat in the living room. "Marcus, get your sister some water. Not too cold." As I headed to the kitchen, I overheard Tyler talking to my uncle. "The new nursery furniture just got delivered. Top-of-the-line stuff, very exclusive. Of course, we're still trying to figure out how to afford the rest of what we need." In the kitchen, I filled a glass with room-temperature water and tried to steady my breathing. It was going to be a long night. As I turned to head back, I froze at the sound of my mother's and sister's voices just around the corner by the pantry. "Are you sure tonight is the right time?" Heather asked in a low voice. "Absolutely," Mom replied firmly. "Everyone's here, And he can't make a scene at his own birthday party. We've discussed it with everyone except Amy, and they all agree. It makes perfect sense for him to sell this place. He doesn't need it, and you do. What if he says no? Heather sounded worried. He won't. Your father is on board this time. Marcus has always done what's expected of him. This is no different. I stood motionless, the glass of water forgotten in my hand. They had planned an intervention at my birthday party. My own birthday was nothing but a convenient gathering to pressure me into selling my home for my sister's baby fund. Heart pounding, I quietly set down the water glass and slipped out the back door to the patio, needing air and space to think. Jack followed a minute later, finding me staring blankly at my small backyard. What happened? You look like you've seen a ghost. I told him what I'd overheard. Jack's face darkened. That's messed up, Marcus. Even for your family. What am I going to do? I asked, feeling cornered. They've got everyone on their side. Not everyone, Jack corrected. Not me, not Amy, and most importantly, not you. He put a hand on my shoulder. Maybe it's finally time to tell them the truth. All of it. Before I could respond, Dad appeared at the patio door. Marcus? Everyone's waiting. Heather's getting tired, so your mother thinks we should eat now. Of course she does, I thought bitterly. I nodded and followed him inside, feeling like I was walking into an ambush I now knew was coming. The dining room felt charged with unspoken tension as everyone took their seats. I sat at the head of the table, birthday boy in name only. Dad took the other end, while Mom positioned herself strategically between Heather and me. Jack sat to my right, a silent ally, while Amy found a spot across from us, her eyes communicating sympathy. This looks wonderful, Marcus, Aunt Janet said as I served the lasagna. Did you make this from scratch? Before I could answer, Mom jumped in. He always had too much time for cooking. Remember how we tried to get him into sports in high school, but he preferred being in the kitchen with Grandma. I made good money catering in college, I reminded her, trying to keep my voice light. It helped pay for books. If you'd accepted our help like Heather did, you wouldn't have needed those little jobs, Mom replied. Tyler cleared his throat. Speaking of money, we finally finished our baby registry yesterday. Some of the essential items are just unbelievable these days. The crib alone is $2,000. I noticed the gleaming watch on his wrist. Definitely new and definitely expensive. Probably a Rolex. For someone struggling with baby expenses, he sure didn't hesitate to treat himself. $2,000 for a crib? Jack asked innocently. Wow. What's it made of? Gold. Tyler straightened defensively. It's European. Top safety ratings. My sister got her crib at Target for $300. Jack continued. Kid sleeps fine. An uncomfortable silence followed before Uncle Greg changed the subject. So, Marcus, how's work? Still at that healthcare place? The question I'd been dreading. I took a sip of water before answering vaguely. I'm actually exploring some new opportunities right now. Mom's head snapped up. What does that mean? Did something happen? Let's not interrogate him on his birthday, Dad interceded, surprising me with his support. I'm sure Marcus knows what he's doing. Mom gave him a sharp look before turning back to Heather. Tell everyone about the baby fund, dear. How's it coming along? Heather dabbed her lips with a napkin. Well, we've calculated that we need about $75,000 to properly prepare for the baby. I nearly choked on my lasagna. $75,000? For what? Everything, Heather replied as if it were obvious. The nursery, a proper family car, child care, the birth itself, a night nurse for the first 6 weeks, baby classes. Didn't Tyler's parents offer to pay for the birth expenses? Amy asked innocently. Tyler shifted uncomfortably. They offered. But we want to be independent. Very admirable, Mom said quickly. Family helping family is different, of course. That's what we're here for. The conversation continued in this vein, with pointed comments about family responsibility and thinly veiled references to my house. Dad remained unusually quiet, though he'd promised to have my back if Mom started pushing too hard. Every time our eyes met, he looked away. Midway through dinner, Tyler excused himself to take a phone call. As he stood, I noticed something fall from his pocket. Car keys. When he returned, I got a better look as he slipped them back into his pocket. They weren't for his BMW, but something new. I recognized the distinctive Porsche emblem. While Mom helped Heather bring out dessert, Amy slid into the empty seat beside me, her phone in hand. "You need to see this," she whispered, angling the screen away from the others. I looked down at photos on her Instagram feed. Heather and Tyler, barely 2 weeks ago, lounging on a pristine beach. Another showed them at a resort pool with champagne. A third captured Heather shopping in what was clearly a designer store, multiple bags in hand. "The Bahamas," Amy explained quietly. 5-star resort. Tyler's sister posted these, then took them down a few days later. Probably realized they didn't fit the "we're struggling financially" narrative. I stared at the images in disbelief. They're lying. All this talk about needing money. They've been manipulating everyone, Amy confirmed. I tried telling Mom, but she didn't want to hear it. Before I could respond, Heather and Mom returned with my birthday cake, a small store-bought one with a single candle. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. "Make a wish, Marcus," Mom said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. As I looked around the table at my family, my sister's fake concern, my father's averted gaze, my mother's calculating expression, something shifted inside me. Years of compliance and peacekeeping crumbled away, replaced by a determination I hadn't felt before. I blew out the candle with more force than necessary, my wish clear in my mind, the courage to finally stand up for myself. Little did I know how quickly that wish would be tested. After cake was served, Mom clinked her glass with her fork, commanding attention. The moment I'd overheard them planning had arrived. She stood, smoothing her blouse, and adopting her concerned parent expression that I'd seen countless times growing up. "Before we finish our lovely evening, there's something important we need to discuss as a family." The room fell silent. I gripped my napkin under the table, feeling Jack's supportive presence beside me. "As you all know," Mom continued, "Heather and Tyler are expecting their first child in just 3 months. This new addition to our family is a blessing that we all want to support." Murmurs of agreement rippled around the table. Amy caught my eye and rolled hers slightly. "We've been discussing how we can best help them prepare, and we've come to a conclusion that makes perfect sense." Mom turned to face me directly. "Marcus, honey, we all agree you should sell your house and give the money to your sister's baby fund. She needs it more than you do." Even though I'd known it was coming, the public declaration still felt like a slap. My cousins actually cheered, like this was some kind of intervention that had finally broken through. Dad nodded with a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. Tyler looked smug while Heather dabbed at non-existent tears. "Think about it," Mom pressed. "You're one person in a 3-bedroom house. Heather and Tyler will be a family of 3 in that tiny apartment. It just doesn't make sense." "Their apartment is 2,000 square feet, I said quietly. Mom waved her hand dismissively. "It doesn't have a yard. Babies need yards. And you're always talking about wanting to travel more," Heather added eagerly. "Without a mortgage, you could rent anywhere. Stay with us when you're in town." My Uncle Greg leaned forward. "Marcus, family has to stick together. Your sister's starting a family. What bigger priority could there be?" The room felt suffocating as everyone stared at me, waiting for my capitulation. This was the moment they'd all been primed for, where good, reliable Marcus would nod and agree to give up the home I'd worked years to afford, all for a baby fund that apparently needed $75,000. I thought about all the sacrifices I'd made. The overtime hours, the vacations not taken, the careful budgeting. I thought about my current unemployment that no one knew about, and how selling my house right now would be financial suicide. Most of all, I thought about Jack's words about boundaries and Amy's Instagram evidence. "You know," I said slowly, setting down my fork, "it's funny you should bring up travel, Heather. How was the Bahamas?" The question landed like a grenade. Heather's face drained of color while Tyler suddenly became very interested in his cake. "What?" Mom asked, confused. "The Bahamas," I repeated. "The 5-star resort where Heather and Tyler spent a week 2 weeks ago. The shopping sprees, the private cabana, the champagne by the infinity pool. How much did all that cost? Was it paid for from the baby fund?" Heather recovered quickly. That was a baby moon. It's a common practice before having a child, and Tyler's parents paid for it as a gift. Really? I turned to Tyler. Your parents paid for the trip, even though you turned down their offer to cover the actual birth expenses because you wanted to be independent. Tyler's face reddened. We have different arrangements for different things. Like your new watch? I nodded toward his wrist. And the Porsche keys in your pocket? Are those also baby expenses? Now wait a minute, Tyler snapped, standing up so quickly his chair nearly toppled. You don't understand our financial situation. We have a plan. And part of that plan involves certain necessary adjustments to our lifestyle that will ultimately benefit the baby. Like buying a new house? I asked calmly. Tyler froze. What? Isn't that what this is really about? You're not struggling for baby expenses. You want to upgrade to a bigger house in a better neighborhood, and you expect me to help fund it. That's not true, Heather protested, but her eyes darted nervously to Tyler. We've been looking at options, Tyler admitted defensively. For the future, nothing immediate. Actually, he continued, his voice rising with indignation, since you want to talk about it, yes, we have put a deposit on a property. It's an investment in our family's future. The neighborhood has the best schools in the state. We're thinking long-term. Tyler, Heather hissed. No, let him explain, I urged, feeling strangely calm now that the truth was emerging. How much is this investment property? Tyler's jaw worked for a moment before he answered. The asking price is $1.2 million. A collective gasp went around the table. Even Mom looked startled. And let me guess, I continued. You were counting on my contribution to help with that, not diapers and cribs. Well, we assumed you'd want to help provide the best possible environment for your niece or nephew, Tyler said, recovering his composure. The house in Westlake Hills has a nursery with a perfect eastern exposure and space for a nanny suite. $1 million house, Dad spoke up for the first time, confusion in his voice. Tyler, you told us you were struggling to afford the basics. We are, Heather jumped in. The down payment is enormous, and there are renovations needed to make it perfect for the baby. So you thought your brother should sell his house so you could buy one 5 times more expensive? Jack asked incredulously. You don't understand, Mom said sharply. Heather deserves the best possible start for her family. Marcus has always been independent and resourceful. He can easily find another place. While unemployed? The words slipped out before I could stop them. The room went silent. What did you say? Mom asked. I took a deep breath. There was no going back now. I lost my job 2 months ago when the company downsized. I've been interviewing and living off savings, but I haven't found anything yet. Selling my house right now would be the worst possible financial move I could make. Mom's expression hardened. And you didn't think to tell us this? We're your family. Why would I? I asked honestly. So you could tell me how Heather would never be in this position? So you could pressure me even more about my house because now I clearly can't afford it anyway. We would have helped, Dad said quietly, like you've helped before. The words came out more bitter than I intended. We've always supported you, Mom insisted. We paid for your braces, your first car. My braces were covered by Dad's insurance, I corrected. And my first car was a $1,000 Honda that I paid for with my lifeguarding money. You didn't contribute a dime. Mom flushed. There were plenty of other things. Name one, I challenged. One significant financial contribution you made to my education or career or home. The silence stretched uncomfortably as Mom struggled to come up with an example. Meanwhile, I continued, reaching for my phone. Should we talk about who's been helping whom? I opened my banking app, found what I was looking for, and held up the screen. This is a recurring payment from my account to yours, Dad. $2,000 every month for the past 5 years. Want to tell everyone what that's for? Dad's face crumpled. Mom looked at him in alarm. Marcus, this isn't appropriate dinner conversation, she began. It's my mortgage payment, Dad admitted, his voice barely audible. After I got sick and missed those months of work, the medical bills, we almost lost the house, and I've been covering it ever since. I finished, while also paying for my own place. So when you talk about family helping family, Mom, maybe consider who's actually been doing the helping. The dining room erupted into chaos. Mom was frantically trying to silence Dad, who for the first time in years seemed ready to speak his truth. Heather was yelling at Tyler about revealing the house purchase. My cousins were whispering among themselves. Through it all, I remained strangely calm, as if a lifetime of pent-up feelings had finally found their release. "You've been paying their mortgage?" Amy asked, stunned. "For 5 years? That's..." She did the mental math. "That's over $100,000. $120,000 to be exact," I confirmed. "Plus the property taxes twice. But they always said they were helping you," one of my cousins said, looking confused. Mom stood up, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "That was a private arrangement between Marcus and his father. It was temporary." "5 years isn't temporary, Mom," I replied evenly. "We were going to pay him back," Dad said quietly. Mom shot him a warning look. "Richard, not now." "Yes, now," I insisted. "I think it's time for some honesty, don't you? Especially since you've gathered the entire family to discuss my financial decisions." Dad looked at me, then at Mom, then back to me. Something in his expression shifted, a resolve forming that I'd rarely seen. "Linda, he's right," he said to Mom. "Enough secrets." Mom sank into her chair, arms crossed defensively. "Fine. We had some financial difficulties. Marcus helped out. That's what family does. And yet when I mention being unemployed, your first thought isn't, how can we help Marcus for a change? But rather, why didn't he tell us so we could use it against him?" I pointed out. "That's not fair," Heather interjected. "Mom and Dad have always supported both of us." "Have they?" I turned to her. "They paid for your entire education, 3 different programs, your apartment for 2 years after college, the down payment on your current place, your wedding. Did you know I took out loans for my degree that I just finished paying off last year?" Heather looked genuinely surprised. "But," they always said. "What? That I didn't need help? That I was doing fine on my own?" I shook my head. "That was their narrative to justify giving you everything and me nothing. We never played favorites," Mom insisted. Everyone at the table, even those previously on their side, exchanged skeptical glances. "Aunt Linda," Amy said gently, "you've always favored Heather. We've all seen it. That's ridiculous." "Is it?" Uncle Greg chimed in, surprising me. "Linda, I've tried to stay out of it over the years, but even Paula and I have discussed how differently you treat your children." Mom looked around the table, seemingly shocked to find no allies. "Richard, tell them." Dad just looked down at his hands. In the uncomfortable silence, Heather suddenly burst into tears. Not the performative ones from earlier, but genuine, body-shaking sobs. "Heather?" Tyler put his arm around her, looking alarmed. "I'm sorry," she choked out, looking at me. "I didn't know. About the mortgage. About your loans. They always told me you were fine, that you preferred being independent, that you didn't want their help." Her unexpected apology caught me off guard. For a moment I glimpsed the little sister I'd been close with before our mother's manipulations had driven us apart. "There's more you don't know," Dad said quietly. "About the baby fund." Mom stood up so quickly her chair fell backward. "Richard, don't you dare." "What about it?" Tyler asked, looking between my parents. Dad took a deep breath. "There is no baby fund." "Not really. What are you talking about?" Heather asked, confused. "Mom's been collecting money for months. From the family, from church friends." "And where did you think that money was going?" Dad asked. Heather looked uncertain. "Into a savings account for the baby. For all those expenses we talked about." Dad shook his head sadly. "Your mother has a problem, Heather. She's had it for years." "Richard, stop it right now," Mom hissed. "A gambling problem," Dad continued, ignoring her. "Online casinos mostly. The baby fund money goes straight to her accounts. She has debts. Significant ones." The room went completely silent. Even Mom seemed frozen, her fury replaced by something like fear. "That's not possible," Heather whispered. "Mom?" Mom's face crumpled, and for the first time that evening, perhaps in years, I saw genuine emotion from her. "It was just supposed to be temporary," she said, echoing Dad's earlier words. "I was going to win it back. I was going to give it all to you, with interest. You knew about this? I asked Heather and Tyler, watching their reactions carefully. Heather shook her head vehemently, but Tyler's expression told a different story. Tyler? Heather turned to him. Did you know? He couldn't meet her eyes. Not the whole thing. I knew your mom had asked some relatives for help with a financial situation. I didn't know the details. You're lying, I said, suddenly certain. You knew exactly what was happening, and you saw an opportunity. Tyler's jaw tightened. I was trying to protect Heather. By using Mom's addiction to funnel money toward your $1 million house? I asked incredulously. You knew my mother has a gambling addiction, and you didn't tell me? Heather demanded, moving away from him. We're having a baby, Tyler. How could you keep this from me? Your father asked me not to upset you during the pregnancy, Tyler defended, looking to Dad for support. Dad shook his head. I asked you not to stress Heather with your mother's problems. I never suggested using it to your advantage or hiding it completely. Tyler's carefully constructed facade was crumbling. The house is a good investment. I was doing what was best for our family. By lying to me? By letting my mother steal from our relatives? Heather's voice rose with each question. Mom sank deeper into her chair, all pretense abandoned. I was going to fix it, she whispered. I just needed a little more time, a little more money. How much do you owe, Mom? I asked gently, my anger giving way to concern as I recognized the depth of her addiction. She couldn't meet my eyes. About 90,000. Gasps echoed around the table. To whom? Dad asked, clearly hearing this figure for the first time. Credit cards. Personal loans. She hesitated. Some less conventional lenders. Loan sharks? Uncle Greg asked in disbelief. Mom didn't answer, which was answer enough. Jesus. Linda, he muttered. This is serious. Why didn't you come to us for real help? I asked. Not schemes and manipulations, but actual help with the addiction. I was ashamed, she admitted, in a small voice. And I kept thinking I could solve it myself. One big win. That's not how gambling addiction works, Linda, Aunt Janet said softly. You need professional help. The atmosphere in the room had transformed completely. The coalition that had arrived to pressure me into selling my house had dissolved, replaced by genuine concern for my mother and shock at the layers of deception. In the midst of this revelation, the doorbell rang. Jack went to answer it and returned with an unexpected addition to our gathering. Sorry to interrupt, he said, but there's someone here who might have some perspective on all this. Behind him stood Dr. Sarah Freeman, my therapist from the past year. I'd started seeing her to work through my family issues, never imagining she'd be standing in my dining room witnessing those issues firsthand. I hope you don't mind, she said. Jack called me when things started escalating. I was in the neighborhood for another appointment. Mom looked horrified. You've been talking to a therapist about us? About how to establish healthy boundaries, I clarified. Which, given tonight's events, seems more necessary than ever. Dr. Freeman's unexpected arrival created a pause in the emotional storm. She didn't try to take control of the situation but offered her presence as a neutral third party, suggesting we all take a moment to breathe. I'm not here to analyze or judge anyone, she explained calmly. But sometimes a crisis like this can be a turning point, if handled with care and honesty. Her presence seemed to have a grounding effect, particularly on my mother, who had shrunk into herself since her gambling addiction was exposed. Marcus has been working very hard on understanding family patterns and establishing healthier relationships, Dr. Freeman continued. Perhaps this difficult moment could become an opportunity for healing, rather than further division. Uncle Greg stood up. I think some of us should give the immediate family space to work through this. He looked at my cousins and their partners. Why don't we head out? The suggestion was met with nods of agreement. As they prepared to leave, several family members approached me privately. I had no idea, my cousin Jason said, shaking his head. I'm sorry, Marcus. Aunt Paula hugged me tightly. You call us if you need anything, you hear? Actual help not. Whatever this was supposed to be. Within 15 minutes, only my parents, Heather, Tyler, Amy, Jack, and Dr. Freeman remained. The reduced number somehow made the dining room feel larger, less suffocating. I think, Dr. Freeman suggested gently. This might be a good time for everyone to express what they're feeling without interruption. Marcus, would you like to start? I looked around at the remnants of my birthday dinner, the half-eaten cake, the scattered gifts, most of which weren't even for me. The symbolism wasn't subtle. I paused, searching for the right words. I feel like I've been cast in a role in this family that doesn't actually fit me. The eternally self-sufficient son, who needs nothing, but can provide everything. The uncle, who should sacrifice his own financial security for a niece or nephew he hasn't even met. The human ATM who doesn't get to ask questions about where the money goes. I turned to face my parents directly. Dad, I love you, but your silence all these years has been a form of approval. And Mom, I can't keep enabling behaviors that hurt all of us, including you. Mom couldn't meet my eyes, her hands fidgeting in her lap. Heather, I continued, we used to be close, before Mom's favoritism and your willingness to exploit it drove us apart. I would love to be a good uncle to your child, but not at the expense of my own well-being. Heather nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand, she whispered. I'm so sorry, Marcus. I didn't see it. Or maybe I didn't want to see it. I turned to Tyler last. I don't know what your endgame was here, but using my family's dysfunction to finance your lifestyle isn't something I can forgive easily. Tyler's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Dad spoke up. I need to say something. His voice was stronger than I'd heard it in years. Marcus is right. My silence has been cowardly. I've enabled Linda's gambling because confronting it meant confronting so many other painful truths about our family. He turned to me with tears in his eyes. Son, I failed you. Over and over again. I told myself I was showing you love in small ways. But the truth is, I was too weak to stand up to your mother when she favored Heather. Richard, Mom protested weakly. It's true, Linda, Dad continued firmly. You've always treated our children differently, and I let it happen. I'm so ashamed of that now. The raw honesty from my father cracked something open in the room. Mom began to cry, not the manipulative tears I'd seen before, but deep, body-shaking sobs. I don't know how to stop, she admitted between breaths. The gambling, the controlling, any of it. I've made such a mess. Dr. Freeman handed her a tissue. Admitting there's a problem is the first step, Linda. There's help available when you're ready. I've needed help for a long time, Mom acknowledged, her voice small. I just couldn't bear for anyone to know. Now we do know, I said gently. And despite everything, we want to help you. Actually help you, not enable you. What about the debts? Tyler asked pragmatically. Especially if some are to loan sharks. That's dangerous. It was a fair question, despite coming from him. Mom looked terrified at the mention of her creditors. I have some savings, Dad offered. Not enough for all of it, but a start. I can contribute something, I said, surprising myself. Not by selling my house, but I have some investments I can liquidate. I have money too, Heather said, wiping her eyes and giving Tyler a pointed look. From my trust fund that Grandma set up, the one you told me to keep for the future house upgrades. Tyler shifted uncomfortably. Heather, we discussed this. No. You discussed it, and I listened. She corrected him firmly. But this is my family, Tyler. My mother needs help. In that moment, I saw a glimpse of a stronger Heather, one who might be finding her own voice separate from our mother's manipulation or her husband's control. Jack, who had been quietly supportive throughout, spoke up. Marcus, remember that job interview you had last week? The one with Westridge Technologies? I nodded. They said they'd call by Wednesday. Check your email, he suggested, a small smile playing at his lips. Confused, I pulled out my phone and opened my email. There, timestamped just 30 minutes ago, was a message from Westridge's HR department. I opened it and scanned the contents, my heart racing. I got the job, I announced, stunned. Senior Systems Architect. It's a 40% increase from my last position. The timing felt almost cosmic, a reminder that while my family had been plotting to take away my financial security, the universe had been working to restore it. That's wonderful news, Dr. Freeman said warmly. Perhaps a sign that new beginnings are possible. Wait, Mom said, looking confused. If you have a new job with better pay, doesn't that mean you could help more with the baby fund? Or, with my debts. I almost laughed at her transparent pivot. Mom, that's exactly the kind of thinking we need to change. My increased income doesn't automatically become family property, but family helps family, she insisted, falling back on her familiar refrain. Yes, I agreed, and I will help, but on my terms, with clear boundaries, and with the understanding that help means supporting recovery and growth, not enabling destructive patterns. Dr. Freeman nodded approvingly. That's a healthy perspective, Marcus. The conversation continued for hours as we navigated the painful truths that had been exposed. Dad revealed more about Mom's gambling history and his own complicity. Heather confronted Tyler about his deceptions and prioritizing wealth over family health. Mom fluctuated between defensiveness and moments of genuine remorse. By the time midnight approached, we had the beginnings of a plan. Mom would enter a treatment program for gambling addiction. Dad would attend support groups for family members of addicts. The debts would be addressed through a combination of resources, with clear agreements about repayment where applicable. As for me, I had made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I am going to sell my house, I announced. But not because you pressured me, and not to fund anyone's luxury lifestyle. Then why? Heather asked. I smiled. The new job is in Austin. It's a perfect opportunity for advancement, and honestly, some distance from our family dynamics might be healthy for everyone right now. My announcement was met with mixed reactions. Mom looked betrayed, Dad looked proud, and Heather looked thoughtful. Will you come back to visit? She asked in a small voice. Of course, I assured her. I want to know my niece or nephew, but on my terms, in a relationship built on mutual respect. As the night wound down and people prepared to leave, Amy pulled me aside. You did good, she whispered. Really good. This family needed someone to finally speak the truth. Jack clapped me on the shoulder. Happy birthday, man. Not exactly the celebration you planned, but maybe the one you needed. They were right. This painful, chaotic evening had somehow become a gift in itself, the gift of truth, of boundaries, of beginning to break destructive patterns that had shaped our family for decades. As I watched my parents leave, my mother leaning heavily on my father, both looking exhausted but somehow more authentic than I'd seen them in years, I felt an unexpected sense of hope. Not the naive hope that everything would magically improve, but the grounded hope that comes with facing reality and choosing a healthier path forward. Heather was the last to leave, hanging back after sending Tyler to bring the car around. I really am sorry, Marcus, she said, hugging me tightly. I didn't see what was happening, or I didn't want to see it. I know, I replied, returning her embrace. We've all been playing our assigned roles for so long. She pulled back, wiping away tears. Do you think we can fix this? Be real siblings again? I smiled at her. I think we can try, one step at a time. As I closed the door behind her, I felt lighter than I had in years. My birthday had turned into something I never could have anticipated, the beginning of my family's painful but necessary journey toward honesty and healing, and my own journey toward a life defined by my choices, not by others' expectations. 3 months passed quickly. The for sale sign in my front yard had given way to a sold banner, and my house was now filled with moving boxes. The closing was scheduled for next week, and I'd already secured a nice apartment in Austin, close to my new office at Westridge Technologies. My first day of work had gone better than I could have hoped. The team was collaborative, the projects challenging, and the compensation package included stock options that could prove valuable in the long run. For the first time in years, I felt like my career was advancing on merit, rather than just desperate hard work. But the professional transition was only part of the story. The greater changes had happened within my family. Mom had entered a 30-day inpatient treatment program for gambling addiction, the week after my birthday revelation. She'd initially gone reluctantly, more concerned about public perception than recovery. But something had shifted during her time there. She'd emerged humbler, more self-aware, and committed to her continuing outpatient therapy and Gamblers Anonymous meetings. The financial mess had been substantial but not insurmountable. Dad had taken out a home equity loan to address the most pressing debts, particularly those to the less conventional lenders who had begun making threatening calls. I had liquidated some investments to help, with a clear written agreement about repayment terms. Heather had contributed from her trust fund, despite Tyler's objections. For once, our family was facing a problem honestly and collectively, without manipulation or hidden agendas. Today, I was hosting one final gathering in my nearly empty house. Not a goodbye party exactly, but a new beginning celebration. Jack had helped me set up a few folding tables in the living room where furniture had once been, and Amy had brought flowers to brighten the space. "You're doing the right thing," Jack said as we arranged chairs. "Clean break, fresh start." "Not a complete break," I corrected him. "Just a healthier distance." "Speaking of which," Amy called from the kitchen, "your parents just pulled up." I took a deep breath, reminding myself of the boundaries Dr. Freeman had helped me establish. 3 months wasn't enough time to completely transform decades of dysfunctional patterns, but we were making progress. The doorbell rang, and I opened it to find my parents standing there, Dad carrying a small gift bag. "Come in," I welcomed them, accepting Mom's slightly awkward hug. "The house looks different," she observed, taking in the empty spaces. "That's what happens when you sell most of your furniture," I replied with a smile to soften the words. Dad handed me the gift bag, just a small going-away present. Inside was a framed photograph I hadn't seen in years. Me at about 10 years old, proudly holding up a fish I'd caught on a rare father-son camping trip. I remembered that weekend vividly, one of the few times I'd had Dad all to myself. "I found it in the attic," he explained. "Thought you might want it for your new place." "Thanks, Dad," I said sincerely. "This means a lot." Mom cleared her throat. "I have something for you too, but it's not wrapped." She handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for $5,000. "Mom, we discussed this." "You don't need to. It's not what you think," she interrupted. "It's not guilt money or an attempt to control you. It's the first repayment installment, exactly as we agreed in the repayment plan. On time, as promised." I looked at the check again, noting the memo line. "Loan repayment 1/24. "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched by this small but significant sign of change. "This means more than the money itself." "95,000 to go," she acknowledged with a wry smile. "But we'll get there." The doorbell rang again, and Amy went to answer it. Heather entered, her baby bump now pronounced at 9 months pregnant. To my surprise, she was alone. "No, Tyler?" I asked as I hugged her carefully. A shadow crossed her face. "We're taking some space right now. He's staying with his brother." This was news to me. "Are you okay?" She nodded. "Actually, yes. After everything that happened, I started seeing my own therapist. She's helped me recognize some patterns in my relationship with Tyler that mirror what happened in our family." Mom looked away, clearly uncomfortable with the implied criticism. "I'm not blaming anyone," Heather clarified. "I'm just trying to make healthier choices before the baby comes." "I'm proud of you," I told her sincerely. "We both are," Dad added, putting his arm around Mom's shoulders in a show of unified support. Over the next hour, we shared a simple meal of pizza and salad, sitting on folding chairs in my nearly empty house. The conversation was different from our typical family gatherings, more honest, less performative. Mom talked openly about her recovery journey. Dad shared his experience in the support group for families of addicts, and Heather discussed her preparations for single motherhood, at least temporarily. "I've had a change of perspective about money and what the baby really needs," she admitted. "All those luxury items we thought were essential, they really aren't. I've returned most of the designer baby stuff and set up a nursery that's simple but perfect." "And the $1 million house?" I asked cautiously. "Tyler lost the deposit when I refused to go through with it," she said with a small smile, which didn't help our relationship, but was absolutely the right decision. "My apartment is more than adequate for me and the baby. You know we'll help with childcare whenever needed," Mom offered. "Thank you," Heather replied. "But I've also looked into a wonderful daycare near my office for when I go back to work. I think it's important I maintain my own income and independence." Mom looked like she wanted to argue but caught herself. "That sounds sensible," she conceded. It was a small moment, but significant. Mom respecting Heather's decision rather than imposing her own vision. As the evening progressed, the conversation turned to my new job and apartment in Austin. I showed them pictures on my phone, feeling a genuine excitement about this next chapter. It's only 3 hours away, I reminded them, and I'll come back for important events, like the birth of your niece, Heather said, rubbing her belly, which could be any day now. I've already arranged to work remotely that week, I assured her. Jack's going to drive me back as soon as you call, and we'll have monthly family video calls, Dad suggested, to stay connected. With clear time limits and agenda items, I added with a smile, remembering Dr. Freeman's recommendations for structured family interactions while rebuilding trust. As the evening wound down, Jack suggested we all raise our glasses of sparkling cider, in deference to Mom's recovery and Heather's pregnancy, for a toast. To new beginnings, he offered, and hard-earned wisdom, Amy added, and family, Dad said, his voice thick with emotion, redefined on healthier terms. We clinked glasses, and in that moment, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in my family's presence for as long as I could remember. Not because everything was perfect, it was far from it, but because we were finally dealing with reality instead of illusion. After everyone had left, Jack helped me clean up the few dishes and fold the tables. So, he said casually, I checked my email earlier. Got some interesting news. Oh, I prompted, curious about his tone. Remember that startup I interviewed with last month? The one in Austin? I stopped what I was doing. Jack, did you get the job? His face broke into a huge grin. Senior Marketing Director. I start 2 weeks after you do. I whooped and gave him a bear hug. You're moving to Austin too? Why didn't you say something during dinner? He shrugged. Tonight was about your family. Didn't want to hijack it. Besides, I wanted to tell you privately. Make sure you're okay with me following you there. Are you kidding? This is fantastic. I was genuinely thrilled at the prospect of having my best friend in my new city. There's one more thing, Jack said, suddenly serious. I've been thinking about your family's situation, especially your mom's gambling debts. Jack, you don't need to get involved in that. We've got a plan. I know, but hear me out. I've been doing some research on gambling addiction recovery and financial rehabilitation. There's this foundation that helps families affected by gambling addiction with financial counseling, and even matching funds for debt repayment when certain recovery milestones are met. He handed me a printed brochure for the New Start Foundation. I made a donation in your family's name. They're expecting your call if you decide to use their services. I stared at the brochure, deeply moved by his thoughtfulness. Jack, thank you. That's what real family does, he said simply. Blood or chosen. The next morning, as I taped up the last of my moving boxes, my phone rang. It was Heather. My water broke, she said, her voice a mixture of excitement and fear. Can you come to the hospital? I'm on my way, I promised, grabbing my keys. 26 hours later, I became an uncle to a beautiful, healthy baby girl named Lily. As I held her tiny form in my arms, Heather watching tiredly but happily from her hospital bed, I felt an unexpected surge of emotion. She's perfect, I whispered. She is, Heather agreed, and I want her to know her Uncle Marcus. The real you, not the version of you we tried to use. She will, I promised. I'll be the uncle who lives in Austin with the cool apartment she can visit. The uncle who tells her the truth and respects her boundaries. The uncle who shows her that family can be complicated and flawed but still loving. Heather smiled, tears in her eyes. I'd like that. Dad arrived with flowers, and even Mom came, keeping a respectful distance but clearly moved by the sight of her first grandchild. We all gathered around Lily's bassinet, a family transformed by crisis but slowly healing through honesty and effort. The following week, I drove away from my old house for the last time, headed toward Austin and a new chapter of life. As the familiar streets of my hometown receded in the rearview mirror, I felt not sadness but liberation. The house had represented security to me for so long, but I now understood that true security comes from within, from knowing your worth, establishing healthy boundaries, and building authentic connections based on mutual respect. My phone pinged with a text message. It was from Dr. Freeman. Remember, Healing isn't linear, there will be setbacks. But you've broken the cycle, and that's what matters most. I smiled, grateful for her wisdom. Another text came in, this one from Heather with a photo of Lily sleeping peacefully. "Thank you for being the one who finally told the truth," she'd written. "It saved more than just you." As I merged onto the highway pointing toward my future, I thought about the unexpected journey that had begun on my birthday 3 months ago. What had seemed like the worst night of my life had actually been the first step toward liberation, not just for me, but for my entire family. The road ahead wasn't perfectly clear. Mom's recovery would have ups and downs. Heather and Tyler's relationship remained uncertain. Dad was still finding his voice after decades of silence, and I was starting over in a new city with a new job. But for the first time, we were all moving forward authentically, facing our truths instead of hiding behind comfortable illusions. And that made all the difference. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that family isn't defined by unconditional sacrifice or blind loyalty. Real family, whether blood or chosen, is built on honesty, mutual respect, and healthy boundaries. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is speak the truth, even when it's painful. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to walk away from toxic dynamics toward a future you design on your own terms. Have you ever had to stand up to family pressure to protect yourself? What boundaries have you had to set with loved ones? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to put their own well-being first sometimes. Thank you for listening. And remember, the family we build through healthy choices can be even stronger than the one we're born into.